Hey everybody, welcome to I Teach 3D channel, training to make you smarter in 3D. Today we're going to take a look at how to make a rocking chair blueprint in the Unreal Engine 4. And I'm using 4.26. I don't think it matters a whole lot, but anyway, that's what we're using. So we're going to use 4.26 here. Now, what I've done is I went ahead and I borrowed a rocking chair. I did not make this rocking chair, and I like to give credit where credit's due, so this is where I'm getting the rocking chair from, is on Sketchfab, and I just typed in rocking chair, and I downloaded this rocking chair, and I kind of like it. And this one is from ta.hullivan, so I downloaded the model, threw it into 3ds Max, and or Maya, I forget which one I used. I used both of them. But anyway, put it on it, and I'm using it in my engine here. So, all right, and then I just put the textures on it in Unreal Engine. So, all right, so very good. If you want to see the material, just quickly, here's the material that I used, and it's all right there, texture sample. So I threw in the base color, I threw in the metallic, the specular, added some roughness because it was a really shiny chair and I didn't want that. So added a little roughness of 80%, 0.8, and then put the normal map on it. So, all right, very good. Let's move along. So we're gonna make let's get rid of that. That was the demo. I'll show you that as we go along. So, all right, so here's the rocking chair. Let's go ahead and make our blueprint. So I'm going to right click and create a new blueprint class, and this is going to be an actor class that we're going to be using here, and I'm just going to call it rocking. How about rocking chair? How about that? Rocking chair. So let's double click the blueprint to open it up, and so when the blueprint comes up here, let's go ahead and we're going to add a couple components. Now the first component we're going to add is, here's the secret of the blueprint. I'm just going to tell you right off, is that when you are, let's put this over here, when you are animating a rocking chair, for instance, this rocking chair right here, when you are animating this, when you animate a rocking chair and it goes back and forth, what happens is you're on this curve here that's on the surface, and the pivot point, as you try to rotate it, if the pivot point is down here and you rotate it, it just goes back and forth, back and forth. Let's take a look at that. So as I throw the rocking chair out here and make it movable, and then if I rotate this, see how it goes through the floor? And that's unacceptable. We don't want that. I want something that's going to rock and it goes and doesn't go through the floor. Now the thing about this, that means that we've got to have a moving pivot point along here. So that's what we're going to do, is we're going to create a moving pivot point. So here in the rocking chair, so when I use a moving pivot point, I'm going to use a helper. In this case, let's go ahead and add a component. I'm just going to add like a cube static mesh helper component. So I add that in there. Let's back it off a little bit. And let's just rename this. It's going to be, I'm going to rename this. This is going to be my cube pivot point. So I know that it's my pivot point. And then this is going to rotate. And then the rocking chair is just going to come along for the ride. Okay? So let's make sure we have our cube pivot point selected. And then we'll, if we have it selected, when we add a component, it will parent it automatically. So I'm going to add the static mesh, which is rocking chair. And it knows that because I've already got it selected here. That's how it knows. So I've added it on there. And so you can see the rocking chair is underneath the pivot point. So the pivot point is what's going to be animated. So when I select this, and then if I go into rotate and rotate it, whoops, grab rotate. So it's going to use the cube's pivot point, okay? But I'll show you the secret here in just a little bit. All right, so anyway, so that's good. Let's go ahead and compile this, and I'm pretty happy with that right now. So let's go ahead and get started. So let's just go ahead and animate the rocking motion for the cube, and let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to open up the event graph, and let's create a timeline in here. In fact, I'm going to get some space, some empty space here. I'm going to right click and I will type in timeline. Timeline. So I'd like down here at the bottom, add timeline. And we'll just call it, how about RC underscore timeline, rocking chair timeline. All right, so I'm going to pull that over here, and right away, what is the thing that we want to do with this pivot point, right? So I'm going to drag off of update, and as my timeline updates, what I'd really like to do is set the relative location, but not just the location, I also want to set the rotation. So I'm going to set the relative location and rotation of the pivot point, not the rocking chair. Remember, the rocking chair is parented to the pivot point. So I'm going to select this one. So, and it adds, because I said pivot point, it's going to add the cube pivot point here as the target, and we're going to set the relative location and rotation of the rocking chair, or I mean of the pivot point. So I'm going to put all that there. All right, good. So you can see I've got new location, I've got new rotation. Let's go ahead and just rotate it right now. First of all, I'm going to compile. Let's go ahead and just rotate the rocking chair, okay? We're going to go ahead and set up a rotator on our timeline. So if you double click your timeline, it opens up a new tab up here across the top, and I've got some workspace here. So let's go ahead and create a new vector track. So let's add a vector track, and let's just call this rotator. So that'll be rotator. And you can see it's going to rotate on 3 different axes, the X, Y, and Z axis. And I don't want that. I don't want to rotate it on all 3. It'd give me some really weird motion. I just want to rotate it on the Z axis. That's it, just the Z axis. So I'm going to lock these other 2 axes so I don't set keys on them. And then in order to set keys on here, I just right click along this blue timeline. Blue is the Z axis here. Now, how long do I want this to animate for, or to rotate? So if I think about it, it's going to go backward. Maybe it'll go back half a second or 1 full second, and it'll go forward a full second. I don't want a really fast rocking chair. I just want a medium speed rocking chair. And so we can adjust it later if we want. So I'm going to set it to 2 seconds. So the length of my animation will set to 2 seconds right up here. And then I do want it to autoplay, and I also want it to loop. So it'll just continuously rock during my whole scene. All right, very good. Now let's set some keyframes. So I'm going to right click here on that blue line and say add a key to Z. And then I'll go over here to 1 second. I'm going to right click, add another key, and then a third key down here, right click, add a key to Z. Now I'm going to go back here to this first key, and let's set the time and the value for this. So the time, I want it to be 0 seconds. And then the value, I want this, and I only know this because I've already done it. I had to kind of play around with the numbers. I want it to be 0.4. 0.4. And then let's go to this other key over here. Let's make this a time of 1 second. And the value, let's go negative 0.4 because I want the rocking chair to rock backwards this time. So it's going forwards, backwards, forwards, okay? Or it could be the other way. I didn't check. It could be backwards, forwards, backwards. So, and then again, this last one, we're going to set this to 2 seconds with a value of 0.4 and enter. Now, ideally, what we really want here is we want kind of a sine wave. So this is going to be a repeating wave here, or curve is what we want. And so far, and I don't want these linear curves, that would give me some really weird looking motion. So let's change this to a nice smooth curve. So I'm going to start with the center one. I'm going to select it and then right click on it and choose user. Very good. And you can see how that smoothed out this curve here. So it's slow out, and then it picks up the pace, and then it's slow in. Because a rocking chair, the further back it goes, it slows down. It comes to a complete stop for an instant, and then it goes back the other way, and it rotates forward again, and then it does the same thing. The closer it gets to the forward peak of the rocking motion, then it's going to stop for an instant and then go back again. So we're going to get this nice rocking motion. All right, now this first key right here, I need to click it, and then I'm going to right click it and choose user. So you can see here what I'm looking for is a nice curve. It starts up here, slow out, comes in, slow in, comes back, goes out, and we could repeat this curve so it's doing the same rocking motion over and over. It's going back, forward, back, and then it would just keep doing that over and over again. So, all right, so this is my rotator. I'm going to compile this. I'm going to save it. And we're in the timeline. Let's go back into the event graph now, and let's hook up our rotator. And you can see that the rotator channel has come available to me right here. It's a vector, it highlights it, and now it's added that to it. So let's go ahead and get our rotator. Now I'd like to take the rotation directly into my new rotation right here, but when I go ahead and do it, it has to make a converter here. It's got to convert the rotation from X vector. It's got to make this vector into like a rotation value right there. So like an X, Y, and Z rotation, okay? So I'm going to pull this over here because we're not quite done yet. So this is the rotating motion, but what if I want the rocking chair to start from any location and I want it to rotate? It could be anywhere, and I want it to rotate from anywhere. So we need to get some initial rotation angle going here. So let's create a new variable, and I'm just going to call it initial rotation angle. How about that? Initial rotation angle. All right, very good. And let's see. And then I don't want it. This is a Boolean. We don't want it to be a Boolean. So I'm going to come over here and let's just make it. Let's make it a rotator. A rotator right there. All right. So now it's a rotator. So let's drag the rotator off into here. Let's get initial rotation angle right there. Now I want to combine the angle that I'm animating with the initial angle so that it will work together to give me my new rotation angle, okay? So we're going to do that together. Well, I need to add these two together, so I'm just going to drag off my initial rotation here, type in the plus sign, shift plus, gives me, oh, and let's, there it is. I had to turn off context sensitive. And then I'm looking for a vector plus a vector, okay? A vector plus a vector. So right here I see vector plus vector, so I'm going to choose that. And it had to do, because this is a rotation right here, that's a rotator, it had to give me another little converter right there. So let's take this, and I like to keep these, I'm going to put this in the bottom one here, and then this rotator is going to go in the top one right there. And then my output right here, so it's going to combine, it's going to add these two, it's going to add these two angles together, my animated rotation angle and the initial rotation angle. It's going to add those two together. It's going to output one number into this rotation vector right there, and then that's going to give us our new rotation. All right, it'll give us our new rotation. So let me see if I can put these all together nice and neat here. There we go. So that's my rotation. All right, so I'm going to compile, I'm going to save. Let's go take a look. That looks good right there. I'm happy with it. It's in my event graph is happy. Let's go see if it's affecting the, if it actually affects the my rocking chair yet. So I'm going to go into my map. Let's drag our rocking chair blueprint out into here, and everything looks good so far. So I'm going to hit play, and it's rocking. Now you can see that the motion that we have there. It's, you know, just like we showed earlier, is that when it's rocking, it's going into the actual, floor, and we don't want that. That's not good rocking chair motion. So we're going to fix that. I'm hitting escape to get out. Let's go back into our rocking chair. Okay. So the way we do that is moving the pivot. Let me go back into here. So this pivot, instead of being down here and rocking into the floor, the pivot should be moved up, and then the pivot is going to have to move, like as the chair moves forward and rocks forward, the pivot is going to have to move forward. So as it rotates forward, it's going to move forward. Or did I say, or should it go backwards? So it's going to go backwards, actually. So it's going to have to go, so as it rotates forward, it's going to move backward. It's like an opposite movement here, okay? So that's what we're doing. Now, the location here. So this has got to move back and forth. Well, let's go ahead and get back into our timeline, and we've got to move that thing back and forth. Now, how far do we know to move it? How do we know how far to move it? Well, that's a great question. So, honestly, the answer to that is you kind of have to look at it. Oops. You kind of have to look and see. I had to do some measuring. And so what I'm trying to do here is, it's probably better to do it in the viewport. So let's do this. Let's go here. Let's go to a side view. And so here's my side view right here. Oh, it's kind of hard to see it, so let's move the whole thing over a little bit right there. All right. So if I were to rotate this, I'm going to go into rotate, and let's say I wanted to rotate this like 15 degrees back. 1, 2, 3, 15 degrees, okay? 15 degrees is where I want to rotate it. Now, what part of this is touching the ground or the bottom part? What part of this is touching? So that's where my pivot point, that's the location that this pivot point should be at. No longer should my pivot be here. My pivot should be somewhere over here. So I'm going to count the blocks. These are, as you can see, each one is 10 centimeters. So I'm going to count 10, 20, 30, 40, maybe like 50-ish. Right there. So maybe 50 units. I could do 40 or 50. You may do one and then kind of play around with it a little bit. So I'm going to do 50 and get it back there all the way there. So I'm going to do 50 centimeters that my pivot is going to have to pivot back 50. And then it's also going to have to go forward 50 because when I rotate this thing, we'll go back here. And then if I rotate it another, what did I say, 15? That was the initial 15. Let's go another 15 to make it 30. Then it's going to have to come positive 50 all the way up here, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, in order to have the new pivot there, okay? So hopefully this is making sense, is that I have to move the pivot back and forth as it rotates, okay? So that's the idea behind it. All right, so let's get back in here. Oh, I moved my chair, so can't really see it real well. There it is. Let's just move it there so we can see everything all together. All right, so let's go back here. Let's go back into our timeline. And now I've got to, we already animated the pivot, this cube rotating back and forth, but now we're going to have to move it, okay? So we got to set up a new timeline for this. So again, we want a new vector timeline. So I'm going to create that. This is going to be our location, so or our mover. How about that? Let's call it a mover. All right, this is our mover, and we want to move it on the just back and forth, and that's the red axis or the x-axis. So I'm going to lock Y and Z here, and so let's go ahead now and create this. Now, the moving motion is going to be opposite of the rocking motion, okay? So my curve, if this curve is up here, if my first keyframe is up, if it's going to be moving the opposite, then this one should be down, okay? So let's go ahead. I'm going to right-click, add a key to the X, right-click, add key to the X, and one more, right key, add key to the X, or right-click. All right, so this curve is going to look the opposite or mirrored of this curve. So let's click here, and so this time it's a 0 keyframe, but the value of this, instead of being positive 50 and rotating forward, because this was a positive number up here, this needs to be a negative number. So we already said we're going to do about 50 centimeters, so I'm going to go negative 50 on this one. Whoa, it went way down there. This one, the center one, let's go 1 second. And then the value is going to be positive 50. And that one went way up there. So, and then just so you can see what it's looking like, let me turn off synchronize and click my little zoom to fit vertical. And then this one also should be 2 seconds with a value of negative 50. All right, So, but again, it needs to be a nice smooth curve. We want that nice smooth rocking chair movement, not this linear where it just goes back and forth, back and forth. It needs to be slow movement, slow out, slow in, slow out, slow in, and we need this to be the same kind of curve. So I'm going to right click, user. I'll come down here to the first one, right click, user, and I've got this nice curve. Remember I said it had to be mirrored because it moves opposite that it rotates. So here it is, and it's the kind of an opposite curve of what this one was. All right, I kind of like that. It looks really good. Let's go back into our event graph. And now you can see there's the mover we just created. And now let's go ahead and set up our little mover thing that's going to be very similar to what we did here. So once again, we had initial rotation angle. We need an initial location, initial cube location. How about that? So because I don't want it to start moving from some world position. I want it to be a relative position wherever the rocking chair is located in my world. So let's create another variable. Let's call it initial cube location. How about that? Initial cube location. We do not want this to be a rotator. This let's make this public. Click. Because we're going to need to do that later on, which means we'll be able to see it later on in our scene and make some changes to it. So we didn't have to do that for rotation. I guess we could, but we're not going to. So initial cube location, this should be a vector. So let's go over here on the right side and change it from a rotator to a vector. There we go. And let's bring it out into our blueprint here. So I'm just going to click drag, and we're going to use a getter. So get initial cube location. And once again, we want to add the initial cube location to whatever the animation is that we're moving it, okay? So that way the two of them together can work together to give us a new location. So once again, I'll just pull off this. I'm going to hit the plus key on my keyboard or shift plus, and we're going to do vector plus vector. And I can update my mover to right there, plug that in. So I'm going to add the mover animation to my initial cube location, and then I'm going to output this, and this will be our new relative location of the cube pivot point, okay? That's what this means. So let me walk you through this real quick here, just in case. So the mover, the animated mover location, it's moving the whole time that it's animating. We're going to combine that or add that to the initial cube location, and that's going to be our new location as it moves back and forth, as it rocks back and forth. So this looks pretty good. I kind of like this. This is our blueprint. So let's go ahead, compile, and save. And let's take a look at it. We're not finished yet, but let's take a look at it and see what it's doing. So I'm going to hit play. All right, wow. So it's rocking back and forth. It's going through the thing. Now, so what's happening here? I've already told you guys, but let's take a close look here. So the location is working, okay? It is rocking, and it's rocking and it's moving back and forth. The problem is that the pivot point is too low down. The pivot point needs to be up higher, like literally in the middle of the chair, okay, as it rocks back and forth. So let's get out of here. Let's go back into our rocking chair, and then we've got to check a couple settings here. So the first one we want to check is this initial cube location. So let's select that, and over here we make sure that the Z is at 145, which it is. All right, we've got that. Then let's go back to our viewport. And here we can see that the cube, remember we said we want it to be right in the center of the chair there. Now we already looked at the chair is 291 units high, and we want to make the cube right in the center of it. So we want to make that at 145. That's where we got that 145 number from. So let's do this. We're going to select the cube, and then we're going to set the Z location at 145. But that made the whole chair go up. And so now, because the chair is parented to the cube pivot point you can see over there, that's why it went up also. So let's just select the chair. And now we're going to move the chair back down, so we've got to set the location of the Z there at negative 145. So now you can see we've got the cube sitting up here right at the center of the chair, and the chair is sitting back on the ground. So those are the three settings that we needed. So the cube pivot point had to be location Z145, and the rocking chair had to be a Z location at negative 145. Let's go ahead and compile that. Let's save it. Let's get back into our viewport. There you can see now the cube's been lifted up. It's sitting in the middle of the chair. And let's see if this gives us a better rocking motion where it doesn't go through the floor. Look at that. That looks amazing. So you can see now right there it's rocking and it doesn't go through the floor because we put the cube up in the middle of the chair as the pivot point. So as it rocks back and forth, it also moves. I guess we'll say as it rocks back and forth, it moves forth and back. So we'll do that. One last thing is, who wants to see a cube in the middle of the chair? So let's go back one more time into here. Let's select the cube. Over here in your details, scroll down a little bit to the rendering rollout, and you see where it says visible. Just uncheck visible. Compile it, save it. Let's go back into the viewport. Then we see the cube is gone. I can hit play, and there it is. So it's all finished, and I know let's see if I can jump up on it. Maybe one more time. Oh, let's see. Maybe sideways. I don't know. I did it before, but anyway. How about a run and jump? Anyway. That's the rocking chair video. So hopefully you enjoyed it, had some fun, you learned some stuff about it. Thanks for joining us today. And so come back, check out some of the other videos. Make sure to hit the like button and also subscribe to my channel. And this is Brad from I Teach 3D, helping to make you smarter in 3D.